Hi, everybody. News editor Sean McCracken here with STR's Jesper Palmqvist. Jesper, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you, Sean, and greetings from Singapore.
So, another month of headlines across Asia Pacific. What's new and interesting from your part of the world?
It's always a lot of stories. Like the picking and choosing is not easy. But I suppose before we get into the footy, actually, you see how keen I am? I'm already saying, uh,
I
which is
don't know
odd.
why, because we don't have
Yeah,
much to be keen on.
correct. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And it is maybe this is a segue that is too much on the nose, but our listeners will have to accept it. But yeah, after what the Geelong coach said about the SCG pitch when we lost to them this weekend, and yeah, listen, it's been raining a lot in Sydney the last few weeks, but the Mumbai wicket area reference was weird. But ignoring kind of when you look at India as one of those markets that I do receive a lot of questions about from different stakeholders, if it's revenue or owners, or especially with that added investment area, is it continuing to move in the right direction?
Mhm.
So I suppose it's easy to then it's important, I think, to ignore. Yes, we have all the potential long-term effects of geopolitics, high tariffs among really good friends, to people who used to or feel like good friends and now
Mhm.
slapping big tariffs. India keeps doing well. The short story is that, right? So we don't see now that this is going to stop because it's reached a level like this is servicing the new investments and all those IPOs in the last few years quite well. You've had 2 years of you had 2 years of really strong growth, and now we've had 18 months of smaller but mostly positive. And what always surprises us is just how broad it is. A country that size, you look at US or China or anywhere, you're going to, or Indonesia or Australia, you're going to see these pockets, but it's just so spread across segment, class, location, that it is growing sustainably, and regional and leisure obviously being the big grower and new brands. I think it
Mhm.
is a testament to what that country is going through as a change. But now with, you know, it's quite extraordinary. So when we look at what the rest of the year and into next year, it still looks like that we, barring any other big geopolitical events, it feels like there's stability ahead for that continued growth, even with a lot of new products opening maybe sooner than the other cycle that you see in other countries. So it's easy to be bullish about a lot of Indian markets still.
I think, I mean, as somebody on the other side of the planet, it seems like us having these conversations, the last couple of years, it feels like the two kind of star countries out of Asia Pacific have been India and Japan. But I get the sense that like Japan, stars aligned, everything is going great there. The currency exchange supported travel. But Japan is Japan. It's kind of mature. It is what it is, right? Like it feels like this moment for India is much more like a sea change. Like we're entering a new era for that country as opposed to just them enjoying a few years of success, right?
Well, I would say one, but there are quite a few differences, but the biggest difference between there is that Japan, with sitting, say, 15, 20 million arrivals and being a domestic market, that's a huge difference was changed, right? Reaching towards that 50 or 40 million and eventually 50 million arrivals is such a transformation in that country that traditionally has good logistics, has, hotel offerings and everything, and food and pleasant experiences, and investment ripen and people getting, debt situation being good. So it had that, whereas and construction costs super high, right? But
Hmm.
India just did was a complete displacement where fewer arrivals than most European countries, and the size of that where it continues to rely on being domestic. So the growth in
Hmm.
India is so domestic driven. The market is just bigger. It's 10 times bigger than Japan in
Hmm.
terms of
Yeah.
population, and the economy is growing so quickly. So they are there have similarities in why they're growing, but it is fascinating to see where some of those, like India, Indonesia, and China, share some of that, and Japan has that incredible influx that is not without friction, as we've talked about, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's still growing occupancy in Japan. It's still growing occupancy. It's obviously much slower now, but as long as that happens, not going to drop, right?
Yeah. And not to totally shift gears to talking about Japan, but it's funny. I was reading a headline this morning, not about anything in Asia Pacific, but it was kind of the tourism officials in Germany now are trying to kind of get the leftovers from all of the overcrowded Southern European destinations. I wonder, like, what's the Asia Pacific equivalent? Like, what are the markets that are like overflow for the really booming, Japanese markets or wherever tourists might be a little crowded out? Is that not a thing?
Well, no, I think it is a thing. You're right. So I suppose in Japan, the what like in most countries, what you want is people to travel outside the big markets because
Yeah,
it
and we've talked
gets
about
too
that.
crowded.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. What did that? I saw the headline the other day of Greece is the new. What was that? I was like, there was a headline something about how because obviously Greece has been so the Thailand of Europe. Greece
Yeah.
is the Thailand of Europe,
Yeah.
right? Because of foreigners can't do it, and obviously we see that in Japan as well. How for like domestic and with the new political parties, will people go to a different place? Japan is it. I'm not going to use the word unique, but it is a very special place to go. I think still it's a very special place globally that has things that no other place has. And that is its strength. Throughout Southeast Asia and everywhere else, where people feel like, I don't want to go to insert Southeast Asian island X. The new destinations are still there, and they had that boom. If it was Vietnam resorts or other, Labuan Bajo in Indonesia, taking some from Bali, but at the same time, Bali is still growing, right? So there is. It's similar but different that we're seeing some of those that are taking where it is, but because of the distances, and I think the cultural variance, it is different from the European pivot, if you will.
Yeah. And I mean, even in the European example, that might be kind of pie in the sky because who is hoping to go to the south of France and will settle to go to Berlin? Like if you're going to Berlin, you probably either need to or want to go to Berlin.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, klaxon there on listen, no. Like I love Berlin, and not only is German the language of love, as both Jan Freitag
I'm
and
not
myself would
anti-Berlin.
say.
I don't want to give that sense whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. I'm just saying.
No, I'm just saying who ends up in Berlin who wanted to be in the south of France instead. Like I feel like there's an intentionality.
Fine. Well, that's so urban versus leisure. Yes, now Berlin is a phenomenal city, but I think like what they're doing there and trying to attract, it is a cutthroat game, right? From a tourism perspective, you need to get everyone you can, and it's funny. If you're European, traveling through and going to German cities has been a thing for a long time. But obviously, the highlight, the top line items is going to be the Riviera and Italy and other things in Spain and Portugal, etc. For sure.
But so not to put too fine of a point on what I was saying before, but it does seem like maybe the difference between India and Japan is room to grow, right? Despite how big and booming and great of a moment this is in India, there seems to be a sense that there's still room for potential and growth.
Huge potential of growth. And it's not a given because there's so many things that need to happen, from policy making to development to investment to population demographics. But when we've now seen X number of years of this and the statement, the intent of investors and IPOs and everyone to continue to invest in regional markets, that's where it is. Like, land prices in big cities, Mumbai and Delhi is one thing and I was rising, but the availability and the expanse of the country, it's a huge potential. Japan is not small, but it's a different growth trajectory for sure that you have, and location as well, right? Look where India is in terms of all the Middle East, the Europeans, and the catchment areas in terms of flights. They have increased flights. So if they grow the inbound, anywhere near where it should be, combining that with the domestic, that's the massive potential. Absolutely.
And just one final time, I do love Berlin. I don't want anyone to have the sense. I've done the tourist thing through the Tiergarten. I'd love to sit down and have some Schweinhaxe. I'm a big fan of Berlin in the most general sense.
In the
Anyway,
most general sense. Okay, now listen. Good. Love for Berlin. Great city. My firstborn, she loves that city too, and we always talk about Berlin. But listen, I just thought something when you said there, like when we look at all these markets around in Asia Pacific as a whole, some of them that are moving up. After India, the biggest question I get is still around Thailand, right? That we mentioned there, because it's been a few tough months. Regional areas are lagging, and the big cities like Bangkok, etc. It's been tough. So I think when I look at the data now and also the forward looking, you can kind of see that it's looking to grow back where it should be after low season and rainy season coming, say in Phuket in September, but it's still behind last year in forward looking, a couple of points. And also Bangkok, like right now in the last few weeks, is like 5% behind in occupancy and $10 behind in ADR. That's pretty much 2023 levels. Now, inflation adjusts that, and you're actually behind. So 25 comes across as a not a great year for Thailand after that Q1. We're looking at 2 quarters of not great, and this is when supply growth is still slowing down. I think so that's definitely a concern when you look at some of the other Southeast Asians.
Are we at a pivot point for Thailand in terms of whether this is just going to be a off year or one of those kind of long-term perception-driven slumps that you see in some markets?
I think it's the former that Thailand, and I try to base that not on, hey, listen what's happened in the last 25 years, because you can't look back all the time. If I look at the fundamentals of the market, who is looking at investing, what they're doing from travel and tourism, and you also look at the other asset classes like office and the rise of branded resi and how it's rejuvenating and the flights, everything all together, I still feel that this is a slump that came across maybe a little bit surprising and how deep it was in many markets. But when we forecast into 26, we still feel that there's an opportunity for Thailand to grow. And that's different from Indonesia. And like Bali's driving through peak seasons really well. Singapore's picking up. We talked earlier this year about, it doesn't look too good, but they're 3% better than same time last year on looking forward.
I mean, I guess
it's looking okay.
I'm not the expert here, and I'm not a destination marketing expert either, but it does feel like you have a top of the funnel marketing problem if I, as a potential traveler, Google Thailand and then headlines involving Cambodia, the first things I see, right? Like that's something that you can only have so much of.
That's right. No. We and like we said last time, and when these things come up, it would have an impact and some cancellations, etc. For the peak season booking months. If that goes away now, and like we said, it doesn't go away, but it goes quiet. As long as it goes quiet, now is the time. In the next couple of months, people will book a lot of December, January, February trips. So that's kind of what drives a little bit of my potential optimism around that. But I agree with that.
So now most of the way through 2025, which is weird to think about, but we are firmly past the halfway point. We just got back on stateside back from the hotel data conference, and there was a lot of talk about kind of where we're at in the year, expectations for the rest of 25, which were stateside a bit dreary. Not gonna lie, people aren't really happy about their trajectory over here, but at this point, like, what do you feel like the headline of 2025 is going to be? Understanding, we not even all the way through the third quarter, but this is a time of year where it kind of comes into focus. So what are you kind of expecting for the full year?
Yeah, as things have slowed down to, again, normalizing, if we normalize all these different markets and say, yes, Japan was growing faster than others before and keep driving that, you bring that down into one fat curve, the word on the street is still combination of cost savings at corporate head offices and at owner, right? So there's cost savings is absolutely deployed in terms of every kind of procurement on services and what they can do, while obviously trying to drive revenue, because they know that consumers aren't spending as much as they did. Now, is it easier to budget with stability, if you will, that we don't have these knee-jerk reactions? I mean, and at the same time, bottom line is not shifting as much. You have this, and arguably it's a bit of yes and no, even though I hate to do a bit of both thing. But issue is that you're sitting at these tighter margins, and even though people are better at it, there is very limited growth in overall in many markets now. So it's kind of like the cards you have. So it's what you have. That's what you got to run with the rest of the year and into 26. So in one way, when people are budgeting for 26, they're looking at, well, you need to take that approach for Q4 as well now, because what has happened is going to happen, because supply growth definitely on sharp decline, if not already low. So that in theory is helping, along with the higher productivity enforced by the last 5 years. But those factors are good, but when that growth is just not happening, it becomes more of a competition between markets, between hotels, between comp sets, and all that. So I think, and again, luxury driving a little bit in its own race. So it's definitely that cost savings. How will that impact? And there's always this fear that it's going to impact service levels. I'm not sure it will. I still think we've had enough of that in the last few years, both at resort and in urban locations, that people cut costs and, the complaints don't go through the roof. Hotels are better these days at managing that and making sure that there is more automation, there's better productivity, right?
But there's also a point of diminishing returns there, right? Like there's only so much fat before you're cutting beyond that, right?
That's, I tried to make that reference at an event a couple of weeks ago and a month ago, and that didn't really work. But that was exactly what I was saying. Like, the fat on a steak, that carries flavor, and if you cut it all away, it becomes dry. So yes, I think that's the point. And I mean,
when we talk about fat and meat, I was already talking about Schweinhaxe one, so I guess we're both hungry this morning.
That's it. But I think in terms of, there are more, you have to consider where that matters or not. Look at in India as a domestic market, and if you're in a regional market, that matters less, right? Yeah. And arguably in China as well. But in a Singapore high-end hotels, it matters more. And I do get that. I just did quickly mention on China, right? So we keep tracking it, seeing what's going on, and it's still a tough market. Top 25. It's any effects that you're seeing and you're hearing, it's year-over-year effects mainly that are like what happened last year. It's not one particular geographic area. It's not urban leisure or particular tier-based cities that are driving it. You have, some like Sanya, Hangzhou, and Fuzhou that are growing. That's because they were low last year. Luxury is a little bit positive, and that it's doing slightly better year-to-date than others. But I think the headline number that I had there was 43% of markets are positive year over year in RevPAR if you look at luxury. But if you remove that, it drops down to 20%. So it's quite a big difference there between high-end hotels. It kind of speaks to that faster turnaround. But listen, we're still waiting. We're looking for it.
I do want to jump back to, you made some comments about budget season. Obviously that's top of mind for a lot of our listeners. I am curious, I know when you see this on your calendar, what you're going to be recording this podcast with me, you're feeling pretty good. I know you enjoy this, Jesper, but if you were instead a hotel manager of some sort going into your owner's meeting talking about budget, how would you be feeling heading into that meeting right now?
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. It's a pretty tough scenario based on what it's a different challenge than what you've had in the last few years. Because when you budgeted from 24, sitting last year, moving into last year, it was the conflict between, 24 was pretty good in growth, so I'm guessing we should have the same. It didn't. So the confidence between owner operator and all that has obviously been disturbed throughout the last couple of quarters. I suppose the clarity is that very few would go into 26. Now, again, very broad and high level this and say, nah, this is the big turnaround. Now, sometimes I'm going to say, sometimes it's a misquote because we forecast, right? And when we look at our forecast, we say, hang on, you're saying that there's going to be growth in 26. Yes. Now, growth year over year will happen in a number of markets because 25 ended up being not so great.
Mm-hmm.
So, taken into context, like it's when we say that there will be some growth, we're not shouting out that Thailand is going to go gangbusters next year. We're not saying that. We're saying that there is probably some growth in Bangkok next year compared to 25 because that was not good. But in actual terms, depending on submarket or where you are, it's definitely not an easy conversation. And I also think the ramp-up period, if you open a new hotel, if you're one of the hotels that have been open just a year or opening now, the ramp-up period there's a drag effect on that. That slows down. You're not going to hit your normal comp set RevPAR or flow through as quickly as you might have done a few years ago. So there's definitely not I'm not shouting on massive positive thoughts about what's happening in a lot of these markets. It is caution. There is absolutely caution in a lot of these markets.
All right. So shifting gears before we run out of time here, as we mentioned before, not a lot of exciting things to talk about with our beloved Sydney Swans. They're kind of playing for next year at this point, which we can use as an excuse for kind of an abysmal loss against Geelong. But I will say to our audience, those who care, those who stick around for the footy portion of the program, we were recording this before the weekend, the final weekend before the finals matchups are set, so we don't know exactly how that shakes out. But I want to know, Jesper, what are your postseason expectations for AFL this year?
Yeah, so if we so again it was hurtful. So if we see Suns should trade places with the Bulldogs, right? So we got, it's interesting how many teams are non.
Like it's a bummer that's even a conversation because both those teams you'd want to see, right?
Well, yes, fine, yes, but I think my point is when the final 8 has more non-Victoria teams versus Victoria teams, I find it funny.
Yeah,
because where footy's from, so like you got Geelong, Collingwood, and oh wait, yeah, that's kind of it. So you got Adelaide, you got Lions up there. I think Cats do look strong. What we saw there. But if I look down, it's a really nice open playoff scheme. So even if Crows have played so well in the last, if I had to pick something right now, I'd probably look at Cats. But I like Hawthorn as well, which would be fun. But for the Suns, when a shout out to our beloved Paul Hammond on our team, who's based in Queensland and who loves his footy. And even though he's a Tigers fan, but since he lives there, he follows the Suns with his beautiful son Zach. They obviously support the Suns. I think they wouldn't mind a run with some Gold Coast flavor. But I think it's going to be.
I also want to point out. I want to point out. So as I've explained before on this podcast, when we as an office here in Cleveland, the STR Cleveland office decided to get into footy, everybody had to pick a team, right? So since that point, we've had a new start, a reporter in Houston, Natalie Harms, who's done this podcast, everything. So first thing when she came on, it's like, all right, you got to pick a team. So she immediately picked the Suns because they debuted pink jerseys this season. Like that was wholly the reason. So the first season she's rooting for this team might be their first ever finals berth. Is that
I think
correlation or causation is the question there.
Well, now I will follow them with twice the amount of interest. That's awesome. Yeah, let's go. Listen, we will watch from the sidelines, like you said, and see what happens for sure.
But we do have you mentioned the Crows and how good they've been, but we have the controversy of, one of, if not their best player, being sidelined through most of the postseason. So
Yep.
it'd be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, this is a sport where it depends on injury, like many others. So,
Well, we
and
learned that
suspensions.
firsthand this season.
This is exactly right. So you got to look at the roster. Well, enjoy the weekend there, everyone.
All right. Well, thanks, Jesper.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on August 21st, 2025, and edited by me, Sean McCracken. For more information on the global hotel industry, make sure to visit us at costar.com/hotel news and look for our other podcasts, including Tell Me More, Next Gen and Lodging, and The Upgrade, on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts.